Like purely just game-wise, I would put Anisimova as a favorite in this match.
A tennis player who has never once discussed politics publicly suddenly found her name at the center of one of the most divisive topics in the entire Philippines. Not because of anything she said, because of something she never said at all. Subscribe now, because this is one of those stories that moves fast online, and getting the facts straight matters more than getting the clicks first. It's also exactly the kind of story that's easy to get wrong if you're only skimming headlines instead of checking primary sources, so we've done that work here already. Here's exactly what happened. In early August, right in the middle of Alex Eala's historic run to the Washington Open final, a graphic began circulating on Facebook. It was designed to look exactly like an official quote card from GMA News, one of the largest broadcasters in the Philippines, complete with matching fonts, layout, and branding. The quote attributed directly to Alex Eala read, "I never wore a green outfit to support VP Sara. That's a big no for me." Attached to that quote was a real photo of Eala, wearing a green visor and shirt, with a date stamp reading July 31st, and a web address that appeared to link to a legitimate news article. The post spread fast. Over 200 shares within days, at a moment when literally millions of Filipinos were paying closer attention to Alex Eala than at any other point in her entire career. She was, at that exact time, in the middle of a tournament run that had already taken down an Olympic gold medalist, a defending champion, and a top 10 player, on her way to a first-ever WTA Tour final. The entire country's attention was locked onto her, which is precisely the kind of moment fabricated content tends to exploit, because a story attached to an already viral name spreads on borrowed momentum it never had to earn honestly. Here's the problem: none of it was real. When fact-checkers actually clicked through to that linked web page, it displayed nothing but a "website expired" notice. When AFP, one of the world's largest independent news verification organizations, searched GMA News's own official platforms for any record of that quote, they found absolutely nothing. And GMA News itself did not stay quiet about it. The broadcaster posted a direct public warning, stating plainly, a fake post using a logo and template resembling those of GMA News is circulating online. The quote attributed to Alex Eala in the poster is not true. That is about as clear and direct a debunking as a major news organization can issue. Not, "We cannot confirm this." Not, "Context is unclear." A flat, on-the-record statement that the quote was fabricated, from the exact outlet the fake graphic was impersonating. So why green? Why did this particular fabricated quote choose that specific detail to build a lie around? Here's the actual, boring, non-political explanation. Green has been closely associated with Alex Eala for a completely different reason for years. She is a graduate of the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, and green has long been one of the signature colors associated with Nadal's own personal brand and training environment, showing up regularly across academy gear, tournament outfits, and merchandise tied to players who trained there. When Eala was actually asked directly about wearing green, her explanation was refreshingly simple. She said she had been given a handful of color options for her outfit and picked one. Nothing more deliberate than that. That's it. That's the entire real story behind the color. Not a political statement, not a coded message. A tennis player picking from a short list of uniform options, the same decision any athlete makes before dozens of matches a year, made months or even years before this specific controversy existed at all. But the fake quote card wasn't the only piece of misinformation that spread around Eala during this exact stretch. A separate collage of images also began circulating, attempting to suggest that supporters of Vice President Sara Duterte had specifically shown up to Eala's matches wearing campaign merchandise, creating what the post implied was a coordinated partisan atmosphere inside the stadium. The collage featured images of people in green shirts and caps, some bearing text like "Purd 2028" and "Send Purd home." Here's where that story fell apart under basic scrutiny. One of the 4 images in that collage was later identified as coming from a completely different, unrelated event, a baseball stadium, not a tennis venue at all. Whoever assembled that collage had mixed in a photo from an entirely different sport, in an entirely different setting, and presented it as if it were all captured at the same match. Some social media users went even further, alleging that tickets had specifically been purchased in bulk for supporters to manufacture a partisan atmosphere inside the venue, a claim that had no supporting evidence beyond the same misleading collage itself. It's worth noting how this kind of claim tends to build on itself once it starts circulating. One shaky piece of visual evidence gets treated as confirmed fact, and from there, entirely new claims get layered on top, each one borrowing false credibility from the last, until the original, unverified image is buried underneath several additional unverified assumptions. Once the mismatched baseball stadium photo became public, the entire narrative the collage was trying to build fell apart along with it, because the one piece of visual proof holding the theory together turned out not to belong to the story at all. Neither Eala nor her camp ever issued a public comment addressing either piece of misinformation directly, which honestly makes sense once you understand the full picture. There was nothing to clarify from her side, because she was never involved in either story to begin with. Both narratives were built entirely without her. Now here's why this actually matters, beyond just correcting a couple of viral posts. Understand the environment this happened in. For months leading into this summer, Philippine political discourse had been dominated by intense, often bitter public debate, including a prolonged controversy over flood control spending that had frustrated citizens across the political spectrum, along with the usual mix of Senate hearings, House investigations, and public frustration that dominates headlines during periods like that. Opinion writers at multiple major outlets, including the Manila Times and the Manila Bulletin, specifically pointed to Alex Eala's rise as a rare moment where Filipinos of differing political views found themselves celebrating the exact same thing, together, without the usual arguments. One Manila Bulletin piece described her Washington victory as coming like a refreshing breeze for a country weighed down by political noise, controversy, and public frustration. A separate Manila Times column went further, framing her competence and discipline as a model the country's own institutions might learn something from. That context matters, because it explains exactly why these fake posts spread as fast as they did. Alex Eala had become one of the only genuinely unifying figures in Philippine public life this year. Politicians across very different factions, who rarely agree publicly on much of anything, found themselves praising the same 21-year-old for the same reasons. Senator J.V. Ejercito publicly hailed her "Never Say Die" performance during her Washington run. Liza Marcos credited her grit and perseverance with inspiring the entire nation. Even a Malacanang reception reportedly became something senators from different sides of the aisle made a point of attending, specifically because of her. When a moment manages to pull that many different public figures into agreement, it becomes an unusually attractive target for anyone hoping to drag it back into the exact kind of partisan fight it had briefly allowed the country to step outside of, whether that was the actual intent behind the original poster or simply an accidental byproduct of careless misinformation spreading online. There's a broader lesson in this story that goes well beyond tennis, and it's worth sitting with for a second. Fabricated quote cards, styled to look exactly like a real news outlet's graphics, are becoming an increasingly common tool for injecting false narratives into real conversations. The format works precisely because it borrows the visual credibility of a trusted source without any of the actual verification that source would normally require. A convincing font and a familiar logo can carry a completely invented sentence further and faster than almost any other format of misinformation circulating on social media right now. This isn't unique to Alex Eala either. Athletes and public figures riding a genuine wave of popularity are consistently among the most common targets for exactly this kind of fabricated content, precisely because their names already generate massive engagement on their own. Attach a fake quote to someone millions of people are already talking about, and the built-in attention does most of the distribution work automatically, long before anyone stops to verify whether the quote is even real. The fact that a linked source turned out to be an expired web page, should have been an immediate red flag on its own, yet the post still spread hundreds of times before that detail caught up with it. The fact that GMA News responded quickly and directly is genuinely the right template for how this should be handled every single time it happens. No hedging, no ambiguity. A clear public statement naming the fake exactly for what it was, posted on their own official channels where it could actually reach the people who had already seen the fabricated version. So here's where this actually leaves things. Alex Eala said nothing about Vice President Sara Duterte. She said nothing coded through the color of an outfit. She wore green because it's associated with the academy that trained her, and because it happened to be one of the options on a list. Everything else attached to that simple fact, the fake quote, the fabricated news graphic, the misleading photo collage, was constructed entirely without her, and has now been directly refuted by the very outlet it tried to impersonate. What actually deserves the attention here isn't a manufactured political angle. It's the genuinely remarkable run she was in the middle of while all of this noise was happening around her, a run that took her past an Olympic gold medalist, a defending champion, a top 10 player, and a 4-time Grand Slam champion, all in the same tournament, entirely unrelated to any of the fabricated stories being spread about her back home. While people online were arguing over a quote she never said, she was on a hard court in Washington, D.C., producing some of the best tennis of her career, completely unaware that any of this was even circulating. If there's one honest takeaway from this whole episode, it's a simple one. Before sharing anything that claims to quote a public figure on a hot-button issue, it's worth spending 30 seconds checking whether the source it claims to come from has actually confirmed it. Check whether the linked article actually loads. Check whether the outlet's own official page carries any record of the statement. In this case, that 30-second check would have shown, immediately, that the quote was invented and the outlet it borrowed credibility from had already said so publicly. And there's a fair, non-partisan question worth asking about why content like this gets made in the first place, regardless of which side it was trying to serve. Attaching a beloved, non-political figure to a political position, real or invented, is an old tactic, precisely because borrowed popularity is powerful. If people already trust and admire someone, a fabricated statement from that person can move opinions faster than an argument made honestly, on its own merits, ever could. That's true whether the invented quote is trying to help a politician or hurt one, and it's true regardless of which party or figure happens to be involved. The tactic itself is the problem, independent of the politics attached to it this particular time. Here's my honest question for you. Do you think athletes and public figures should be more proactive about correcting misinformation like this themselves, even when it's not really about them at all? Or is it enough for the original outlet, in this case GMA News, to simply set the record straight the way they did? There's a real argument on both sides. A direct response from Eala herself might carry even more weight with fans than a broadcaster's statement, but it also risks giving a fabricated story more attention than it ever earned on its own, and pulls a non-political athlete directly into a conversation she never chose to enter in the first place. Drop your thoughts in the comments, genuinely curious where this community lands on it, and whether you've noticed similar fabricated quote cards spreading around other public figures recently. And if you want accurate, fact-checked coverage of everything happening around Alex Eala's incredible season, on the court and off it, make sure you're subscribed, because separating what's real from what's manufactured is exactly what this channel is here to do, especially as her profile keeps growing heading into the US Open. Because the actual story here was never about a fake quote or a green outfit. It was about a 21-year-old tennis player having one of the best months of her career, while completely unrelated noise tried, and failed, to attach itself to her name.